Hey guys, welcome to the channel and welcome back to another live video. All right, let's see here. Okay, good to have you guys as you come in today. Do me a favor as always, guys. Let me know where you're coming from. We are on a number of platforms. If you get cut off, if you're on Facebook and you get cut off, you can always go over to YouTube and just type in your search engine on YouTube, Smart Money Bro, and we will go from there. And let me know you can hear me, guys. If you're checking in, give me a thumbs up. You can hear me every Thursday. I say about Thursdays and Saturdays. Thursdays and Saturdays, we jump on here and we go live and we talk about an issue, a money issue. All right. And if you're just joining us from one of the other platforms, again, Thursday afternoons, 4:30 p.m. Central Time, Saturday mornings, 11 o'clock in the morning Central Time, we go live and we talk about a money issue, money topic today. And what I do periodically every now and then, guys, is I talk about what's happening in the U.S. economy and what's happening with the Federal Reserve and inflation and CPI, core PCE, the job market, housing market. I try to hit some of these things for just regular people so that we can get that information from a source that's not, CNN, Fox, whichever side of the aisle you're on. We try to give you that information just plain for regular, average, everyday people who have money, who want to handle money and want to handle their own personal money better, or want to be more informed in terms of investing, right? So that's what we do. So today it's going to be all about the Federal Reserve. Give me a shout out, thumbs up if you're checking in. Looks like we got some folks from all over the city, all over the country. We usually get people from all over the world. We got Facebook here as well, the Remnant Facebook group as well. So I'm glad you're here. But if you want to see my screen, you want to come over to YouTube. We got folks checking in from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Orange Park, Florida, Summerfield, Florida. We got Mrs. Moore in the house. Thanks for the thumbs up. Stephanie Mills in the house. We got Anthony Steen. Give me a thumbs up. We got Memphis 10 is here in the house. We got Raleigh, North Carolina, Atlanta, Twin Falls, Idaho, right? Let's see here. I'm coming in, guys, in just a moment. Give me a second here. I'm going to prop that up in just a second. Let's see here. There we are. Boom. That's me. All right. So there you go. Appreciate you guys. Let me know that. But let me know where you're coming in from, guys, and let me shout you out. Baltimore, Maryland is here. Let's see here. Philly is in here. The suburbs of Philly is good to have you here. Texas in here. Yoakum, Texas. Rochester, New York. We got them from all over. Alexandria, Virginia, all over, guys. So we're glad to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. And let's have this conversation. Somebody said Jayhawk. Is that the KU Jayhawks? In Lawrence, Kansas? If so, Ty, let me know. So we're just going to have the conversation about what happened with the Federal Reserve over the last couple of days, guys. I don't know if you were watching, paying attention. There's a lot of other news going around, lots of politics, lots of foreign relations things going around in the news right now. But if you missed it, the Fed Chair Jerome Powell testified before Congress. So we want to have a conversation and kind of give you guys a summary of what happened. Some of it's kind of bad news, to be honest with you, right? For the regular investor, the regular average American person who's looking to invest and grow their money, some of it is not so great. Maybe the person who's looking to maybe buy a new house in the next 6 months or a year, maybe the news was not so great for you. But for other folks, maybe it was great. But we'll see. We'll have a conversation about it. Let's see here. Let's see. Appreciate it, Donald. Thumbs up to you too. I appreciate it. So let's just talk about it, guys. And feel free in the chat, especially here, wherever you're seeing this video at, be it LinkedIn, whatever. Feel free to drop a comment. And at the end, we'll do a little Q&A and we'll have a little fun here for the next 30 minutes or so. Hey, Shadow, good to have you here in the house as usual. So yesterday, guys, here's what happened. Yesterday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell testified before Congress. And he testified again today before the Senate. So yesterday he was in front of the House of Representatives. By the way, smash the like button as you come in, guys. Hit that like button for me. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. If you're checking me out from a different platform than YouTube, come on over to YouTube and hit the subscribe button and become a subscriber, because we dig into the details quite a bit sometimes. Sometimes we dig into the details in a quite a bit way. But so yesterday, the Fed Chair Jerome Powell, he testified in front of the House of Representatives, what they call the Financial Services Committee. And he sort of just reiterated some of the stuff that he always reiterates, but he said some really important things that I think is pretty interesting for us to know as regular folks, right? But and he said some of the stuff we always hear him say when he reports out from the Federal Open Market Committee's meeting, right? They have those 8 or 9 meetings throughout the year when they make a decision whether or not they're going to raise the Fed funds rate, lower the Fed funds rate, or leave the Fed funds rate alone, right? So he said some of the similar things that he always says. But today he was before the Senate. So, by the way, this is a semi-annual thing, okay? Every 6 months, the Fed, the chair, goes before the House and the Senate and gives a real briefing, and then he gets peppered with a bunch of questions from the Congress members that sit in those two committees, the committee in the House and the committee in the Senate that deals with it. So we're clear. I just want to reiterate this, and I know most of you know this already. So we're clear. The Federal Reserve is not the U.S. government. Okay, they're two separate entities. The Fed is a private company, right? And the government is the government. Now, do they work together in tandem? Yes, they work together in tandem. Board of Governors is an independent government agency. The Board of Governors. Now, the Board of Governors is a federal government agency. And the Board of Governors is located in D.C., right, along with all the other tons and tons of federal buildings in D.C. And so the Board of Governors is the federal government agency that regulates things like banks and monetary policy. They regulate all that type of stuff. They're the arm of the federal government, an agency of the federal government. But the Fed itself is not the federal government, right? The Board of Governors, they oversee basically the activities of the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve banks in the 12 districts, right? The Federal Reserve has 12 districts in America. So that's what the Board of Governors kind of does, right? Guides the operation of the Federal Reserve System as the arm of the United States, as the arm of the federal government. Right. And of course, the Federal Reserve, there's responsibilities. And I'm just giving you some basic background of the Fed before I dig deep. But the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and I'm not going to go into all that, but that's how it came about. Right. One of the board members. OK, so let me just say this, too. You probably heard the FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee. Right. That's the committee on the Fed that sets monetary policy with the Fed funds rate, like I said earlier. Right. And they made it meet a few times. But the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, that board of the Federal Reserve, not the Board of Governors, that's a board of the Federal Reserve. They make up about 12 members. I think it's 12 or 13. Maybe it's 12 members there, right? And most of the members come from the Board of Governors, that is the federal government agency. So I know it gets a little confusing, right? But just know that there's some intertwining there, intermingling there, but the Fed is the Fed. The government is the government, right? The government is the government. There's, by the way, there's 12 districts, right? 12 Fed banks throughout America, right? And they're pretty much set up like private corporations, right? They have a bunch of smaller member banks that each district holds stock in each district, all that good stuff. So I'm not going to bore you with all that stuff. But I just don't want you to confuse the Fed. Some people say the Fed, the Fed, the Fed. Sometimes when they're talking about the Fed, they talk about the federal government. Sometimes they talk about the Fed, they're talking about the Federal Reserve, right? I just want to separate the two, right? The Department of Treasury, DOT, that's something totally different, right? Right. Now, the Department of Treasury is a federal government agency also, and they work with the Fed to borrow money and do all the stuff, raise money and increase the Fed's balance sheet and all that good stuff, right? So the Federal Reserve's chair, Jerome Powell, went before Congress for his semi-annual debriefing or briefing, right, where he reports out, right? And he told the central bank, he mentioned to Congress that the central bank's policy setting committee, the FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee, is not convinced yet that continued process, let me read it exactly, that continued process, the progress towards their 2% inflation objective, it's not assured yet. And it won't make sense to cut interest rates until they are confident. So the Fed Chair Jerome Powell, pretty much over the last couple of days, he laid the case out for why the Fed won't be cutting rates, right? So we thought, okay, over the last couple of years, year and a half, the Fed raised rates. When we say raise rates, we're talking about they raised the federal funds rate. They raised the federal funds rate. What is the federal funds rate? When we say they raise rates, they raise rates. The Fed doesn't raise your home mortgage rates from 3% to 6%. The Fed doesn't do that. But what the Fed does has a trickle down effect on that, right? So the Fed has raised the Fed funds rate. And the Fed funds rate is the rate that banks charge one another for overnight lending. And they've raised that to a range between 5.25% and 5.5%. Now, 3 years ago, that was around 0%. And so they've raised it and raised it and raised it. And the whole purpose of raising it is because every time they raise that rate, then those banks that have to pay a higher rate to borrow money from one another, they pass that cost on to me and you who want to go out and get an auto loan at the bank. Now, 3 years ago, that auto loan was 3%. Now that same auto loan is now 6% because the Fed fund raises the rates, and that affects all the short-term rates that banks charge us, not long-term rates like mortgage rates, but short-term rates, the rates on credit cards, the rates on automobile loans, the rates on a 5-year secured loan that you might get for a bank to go and buy whatever, right? So that's why all this matters, because when the Fed raises that rate, they make it more difficult to borrow money for me and you, right? And when the Fed lowers that rate, they make it easier for us to borrow money because now our short-term rates go down. Now the automobile rate that was 6% because they raised it, when they lower the federal funds rate, now the auto loan rate goes down to 3 or 4% again, right? So everybody and their mother was expecting the Federal Reserve to start cutting rates soon in 2024, reducing the rates, reducing the federal funds rate. Okay. But the Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, the committee, the FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee, does not expect that it will be appropriate, and I'm going to read it specifically, that it will be appropriate, does not expect that it will be appropriate to reduce the target range, federal funds rate, until it has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably towards 2%. That's what he said in his statement to the House. He said something similar to the Senate today, this morning, right? Now, when we say inflation moving towards the 2%, we're not talking about the headline inflation, the CPI. The headline inflation is what you see that flashes across the news all the time. That's headline inflation, CPI. The Fed is talking about their other measure of inflation, which is the PCE, the core PCE, right? When they want to get it down to 2%, they want the PCE inflation to be down to 2%, core inflation, right? The difference, CPI includes food and energy. And food and energy go up and down big time, really volatile. So the CPI includes that. And so the Fed, and Jerome Powell reiterated today, the Fed doesn't really use that as much as they use the PCE, core inflation, that removes energy and food. Why do they want to remove energy and food? Because energy and food are very volatile. They go up, they go way up, they go way down, and it has a tremendous effect. So they use the PCE core inflation to throw that out. Throw out the outliers called food and energy. Food is energy, by the way. Food is energy, meaning that in order to get food to your grocery store, it costs energy. It takes energy, and they kind of work in tandem to an extent, right? Because they got to use some type of energy to take to process the food, right? But that's another whole story. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little background, right? So, and I will talk about the stock market in just a minute. But to summarize this, he had like 3 hours yesterday and 2.5 hours today. Just to summarize, let me give you a few things that was mentioned. Let's see here. Let me check the chat, guys. Don't forget to hit smash the thumbs up button, guys. We have these conversations. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Share the video, etc. Right? Looks like somebody jumped in here from Western Massachusetts. Good to have you here. Let's see here. Yeah, we'll talk a little in the video later too. All right, so yes, hit that smash button. Evans has many faces. Hit that smash button. Smash that like button for me. So here's the deal. 2 days, did a lot of talking, asked a whole bunch of questions by the folks on Capitol Hill, who most of them, and I'm no expert, right? I don't claim to be an expert, but most of them on Capitol Hill are just like me. They don't really know all the details of these economics. They aren't economics professors. I'm no economics guy at all. I just sort of understand it a little bit, so I thought I'd bring it to you guys. But most of the folks that were asking the Fed president these questions, you could tell by their questions, they don't have a deep understanding of it like he does, which is understandable, right? They got a whole bunch of other stuff they're thinking about as well. But he answered a lot of inquiries, a lot of questions from these Congress members in both the House and the Senate. And, he said, basically, one of the things that he said, just to give you a summary of it, he said that the Fed expects interest rate cuts to come sometime this year. So if we're expecting interest rates to come sometime this year, this could be a good sign for some folks, right? But I want you to understand this, and I'll dig into this a little bit in just a little bit. But the Fed raises interest rates to stop spending, and they lower interest rates to kind of push the economy, push people out to get them to spend more. And they play this whole game. Let's get into it later. Okay, so he also mentioned that not only will cuts come later this year, he also mentioned that, well, actually, I'll say it like this. One of the Congress folks actually went into, why do they think a 2%? Why are you waiting till the I thought this was a pretty interesting exchange. They said, why are you waiting on getting down to 2%? Why not 3%? To feel satisfied? Why are you really worried about just this 2%? The Fed wants the core PCE to get down to 2%. What does that mean? 2% inflation in regular terms. All it means is prices are going up at a rate of 2% per year. Prices are going up at a rate of 2% a year, year over year. Okay. Sometimes we get confused and say, oh, inflation's still high, and we're not really sure. Inflation just means the rate of prices going up is at 2%. That's where they want it to be. That's a good number. And there's been many economists that have argued for years and years, we should be targeting a 0% rate or somewhere between 0 to 2%. And the congressperson asked the Fed chair, he said, why not a 3%? Right? Because 2% may not be attainable. And Powell sort of really, in my opinion, disrespectfully shrugged off the question, right? But the whole 2% target for inflation that whole thing really didn't start in America. That thing started really over in New Zealand, and then it was picked up by Australia's government back in the 90s or so, if you care about digging into that. But then European countries adopted it. In about 2011, 2012, America's Federal Reserve adopted the 2% target as their policy. So the Fed says, hey, 2%. The Fed says anything above 2%, if we target a 3% or a 3.5% inflation rate, it could maybe normalize higher and higher prices more often than they feel like they want to. And like I said, some economists say, well, we don't want 3%. You should be targeting 2%. So we have no inflation. And the Fed's fear is that would cause what they call deflation. And deflation is the opposite of inflation. Deflation is when prices start dropping really fast. And that's really what happened 1929, 1930 or so, when we had the Great Depression here in America. Prices drop quickly. Guys, when prices prices going up fast is bad. That's inflation, high inflation. Prices going down too fast, that's deflation, and that's not good either, right? When prices start dropping really fast, that means demand for things have gone down, and businesses have to start doing what? What's a business's largest expense is what? Labor, right? So when prices go down and down and down, businesses have to lay off a bunch of people, right? Because they got to stay in business. How do you stay in business if prices are going down, 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 and you still want to make a profit? You got to cut the biggest expense. The biggest expense is people, humans. So when deflation happens and prices go down too fast, too quick, and too far, you see unemployment skyrocket, go way up, right? And people have less money, and the economy can sort of implode upon itself. Less people have buying power as more and more people get laid off and unemployment raises. And it's pretty much the opposite of inflation, really just as bad, right? So there's this balancing act between prices going up too fast, too soon, too high, and prices going down too fast, too soon, too low, right? Inflation versus deflation is a big problem. And so the whole time, and a lot of people, when they discuss, the Fed and inflation, deflation, they don't really get the fact that the Fed really, although the Fed is a propaganda machine, let's keep it real. They're a propaganda machine. They got to make sure that everything they say doesn't cause a stir here or cause a stir there, because anything they say can sway markets, right? So, but the Fed is doing a balancing act the whole time. They're raising rates. And when they raise rates, they want you to stop spending so much. Then they lower rates. And when they lower rates, they want you to get out there and spend more, right? They're playing this balancing act with consumers. And as a consumer, my job is to help you understand what's going on as a consumer, because we're all consumers, right? See, on one end, way over here, we had inflation, summer of 2022, when the CPI headline inflation was up over 9%. And that's when the core inflation was up over 6%, right? Then we have deflation way over here. So we don't want to have, either one of those. So that's the balancing act that has to happen. I don't know why I got off into that, but excuse me. So the Fed wants to target a 2% inflation. Powell said today that inflation has, we said it yesterday, inflation has eased notably. That's his words, eased notably, that over the past year, right? And the beauty of that, the good thing, this is good news, that inflation has eased up considerably and notably, but unemployment hasn't gone up. Typically in the last 40 or 50 years, when you look at all the models and all the graphs or whatever, whenever you have inflation, you have unemployment increasing, right? So thankfully, we haven't seen inflation, the unemployment rate go up. We haven't seen that. Good. That's wonderful. And of course, the Fed, one of their mantras they always talk about is we want to see maximum employment, right? That's one of the things they say. They got two things we want to see as a Federal Reserve. Our mission is price stability and maximum employment. But listen, just so you know, when the Fed and Jerome Powell says maximum employment, that doesn't mean they want everybody working. Okay. It's not at all what it means. They definitely don't want everybody working, right? They just want employment at a rate that's good enough while everything else balances out, which they've had, right? And so they've had really low unemployment. I think the jobs report comes out tomorrow, and it's going to show unemployment probably in the threes or something like that. So 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, near historic lows, basically. So unemployment. So the job market, the labor market is tight. That's what they call it's tight, meaning that most people that want to find a job, there's a job out there for them. Not everybody, but most people, right? Low unemployment, even as this immigration thing has kicked off, right? And you guys have been watching the news. You've probably seen about immigration, right? Certain states down in the southern border of America saying, boom, can't do it. We're going to bust these migrants over to who have come here illegally based on the law. We're going to bust them over to another place or to another city, a city that's, I forget what's the term they call these cities, guys. Sanctuary cities or something like that. So so even with the migration and more workers are available, I think more workers are available through this migration. We see all this immigration coming in, and there's a lot going on with that. There really is a lot going on with that. Who's right? Who's wrong? Which side of the fence are you on? I don't know. I mean, I don't take a stand one way or the other on this channel typically when it comes to political issues, right? But I just say that you got to pay attention to what's happening with that, because that's going to flood the job market with more available workers. Is that the end goal? I don't know if that's the end goal of the administration right now, to actually have more, to flood the market with more workers. I don't know what their end game is with that. Of course, we know it's a battle between both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, Democrat, Republican, whatever side of the aisle that you happen to land on, right? And so me personally, I don't take sides one way or the other. I know that there's good and there's bad on both sides. There's crazy and there's wonderful on both sides, right? So I find it interesting that immigration thing is going on. At the same time, we have this super duper low employment. And I'm wondering, does that have anything to do with it? Right. So I also found at the beginning, let me go back and say something else I found very interesting about what Powell had talked about. In the beginning of today's testimony, in front of the Senate, there was a Senate banking chairperson. I think let me find their name, Sherrod Brown, maybe, from Ohio, that opened up today's hearing with Fed Chair Jerome Powell, and talked about and mentioned the fact that the central bank's main tool, setting monetary policy by adjusting the Fed funds rate, that's their main tool. They have another tool, by the way, and I'm not going to dig into that on this video, but the Fed really has two tools to control this whole money thing. They got the Fed funds rate, but they also have their balance sheet. And I'm not going to dig into their balance sheet on this video, but they also have that as well. But this Sherrod Brown from Ohio, the congressperson from Ohio, said that the central bank's main tool, the Fed funds rate, doesn't seem to do enough, or is not doing enough to bring down prices for everyday Americans, right? And that adjusting these rates, these Fed funds rates, really don't do anything to address the real cause. And this congressperson said the real cause for why costs remain too high for Americans, which is price gouging by corporations. Put a thumbs up in the chat, guys, if you agree with that senator that price gouging by corporations is the biggest cause of why prices are going up, or prices were going up as much as they were. Let me know in the chat if you think that it's price gouging. Speaking of price gouging, I was watching when the Super Bowl took place a few weeks ago. I was checking out how hotels do, and you guys know how hotels do, right? Big event in town, that $80 a night room, now it's $300 a night. And I'm saying, wow, okay, why is that legal to do for say a hotel or an establishment, to raise their prices so much? But let me know if you guys believe and think and agree with the Ohio senator that, yeah, it's price gouging by corporations that's making, prices go up, and everyday Americans feeling the pinch more so, right? So, I mean, that's what he said. I think it was, yeah, sure. I think Sherrod is a he. That it's price gouging. We got a few thumbs up to say, yeah, I think that happens. A few of you guys are agreeing with that. I understand that, right? I understand that could be, and especially Sherrod Brown, he's probably speaking for his constituents in his whatever area of Ohio that he represents. And it could be price gouging. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but I know that is a real cause and concern. So what happens to a corporation when they price gouge as a consumer? How does that, what do we do as consumers? Should we stop patronizing those businesses that we think are price gouging? So that's something to think about, guys. That's something for us as consumers to be aware of, that does happen. I do believe that it does happen, right? I just don't know on what scale it happens. Does it happen on a large scale or a small scale? Somebody said, I disagree. Eve has many faces, says I disagree. You'll see somebody said the idea that price gouging is causing all this inflation is laughable. Anyone who's believed that is out of their mind, says Resolute Germ. Somebody says it's 100% gouging. Raising prices to offset increased costs doesn't produce record profit gains. So I think some of it might be the industry, right? So maybe the oil industry, they saw record profits 2 years ago when our inflation was out of the, really, really high. The oil industry and the gas industry, the natural, they saw huge profits. So were they gouging at that time? I don't know. Could be. But I do think there's a number of factors, and it's not just that one factor that it's price gouging. Sure, price gouging happens, I think, everywhere, right? But here's the other question. What is the difference between price gouging and just raising your prices to meet demand? So, for example, I have a hat right here, right? Always wear a hat. Think about this for a second. If all of a sudden the demand for my hat goes up, I'm probably going to do what to my prices? I'm probably going to increase them. So at what point does me increasing my prices turn into price gouging? At what point does me increasing the price to sell my hats? Because now when the demand goes up a little bit, guess what I got to do? I have to hire a couple of employees to help me produce and manufacture this hat. So if I go out and get 10 employees to come in here and help me manufacture my hat, then guess what? Now I have to raise the price to offset those other employees, right? And I'm talking about this on a really basic, elementary, small level, but this is how we should be thinking. We got to also be thinking from a business standpoint as well, right? So as a business owner, I have to raise the price of my hat, but some people will say, wait a minute, that hat was $10 last week. Now it's $15. Oh, that's price gouging. Maybe it's not price gouging. Maybe it's just me trying to keep up with demand, because as soon as the demand goes away, my price ain't going to be $15 no more. If people stop buying the hat at $15, I'm lowering the price to $12 and I'm laying off some of those workers. Now, you might be saying, well, maybe it's an industry, because I said earlier, it could be industry by industry, an industry that everybody needs to have. Everybody don't need a hat, but everybody needs gas for their car to get around. So maybe the industry can dictate more so whether it's price gouging or not, because if it's an industry where you have to have me, as an owner of a business, you need my services. You got to have it, right? And I'm the only one or only 2 or 3 that can offer it, then I can raise my prices a little bit and do a little bit of price gouging perhaps, right? So it's just, I'm trying to get you guys to say, hey, okay, how do we look at this thing from both sides of the fence, right? Not just the consumer, but also as the business person as well, right? So the point is that this Sherrod Brown came in and said, okay, what you're doing with the Fed funds rate is not really attacking the real cause for why costs remain too high, which is price gouging by corporations, right? And the cost of housing. He also mentioned, Sherrod Brown, the person from Ohio, the senator from Ohio, also mentioned Housing, right? He said that keeping rates too high for too long strangles the economy. Federal Reserve Jerome Powell, what are you doing about that? Said Sherrod Brown. Keeping rates too high, 5.5 or 5.25 to 5.5% for the Fed funds rate, strangles the economy. And he said no one wants this. He was, and these Congress people, right? They get a little fired up. Right. They get a little fired up for literally no reason. They're having a conversation. He's in front of them testifying and they get a little fired up. But anyway, they were pretty fired up. And so Sherrod went on to say that now's the time for the Fed basically to decide if it's going to make good on its commitment to workers and families by lowering interest rates and protecting the country. I think he said protecting. I'll say it exactly how he said. Protecting the country from Wall Street executives who have used their wealth, power to influence economic policy and avoid accountability for their risky bets. Right. So this Sherrod Brown, he was, fighting for the people. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. That's good. Right. Just to say, the Fed really didn't have a good comeback for that. Right. For those opening remarks, by the way. Except pretty much the same stuff that the Fed always regurgitates and says, right? The fact that, hey, we still have our policies in effect. We totally understand what we do affects the American people and all this good stuff. But I thought that that opening was pretty interesting, right? The other thing that was interesting that the Fed said, I'm just giving you some updates, right? The other thing that the Fed said over the last couple of days, because we got to know this stuff, is about commercial real estate. Now, last week on this live, I talked about commercial real estate and I talked about bank failures. The fact that the bank term funding program is going away on March 11th in 4 days, meaning that we're going to see a problem with banks, right? So we got to be paying attention to our small and mid-sized banks. The big banks, the big boys, they're not going nowhere, right? The Bank of America's, the JP Morgan, they're not going nowhere. But it's that mid-sized bank and that small bank that is going to have a problem, especially if they're heavy with commercial real estate loans. We talked about this last week, but when a bank is heavy on commercial real estate loans, that's going to be a problem because a lot of commercial real estate investors, they don't have the money, they don't have the revenue and income and the tenants in their commercial buildings to actually renew their loans and pay their loans. There's going to be a ton. Probably some people are expecting up to $1 trillion of defaults on commercial real estate loans in the next year. And so this was brought up by one of the Senate members today, I think it was today, where they asked the question, what's going to happen with these commercial real estate issues? These banks, small and mid-sized banks that are heavy, carry a lot of commercial real estate loans on their books, right? Pretty interesting phenomenon, guys, because if you go to a lot of major cities in America, there is a lot of empty real estate, a lot of empty commercial real estate, especially in larger cities, a ton of it. Why? Because, the natural nature of people trying to reduce their footprint and the onslaught of technology that has allowed many businesses to reduce their footprint means that you got a lot of people working from home, either part-time, full-time, whatever it may be. A lot of people aren't going into the office like they were. And because of that, retail buildings are going to face a big issue over the next year. So the Fed Chair Jerome Powell, when he was asked about that, and he was asked about bank failures due to either this phenomenon, he didn't really speak specifically to bank term funding program going away. I think there was a little bit of conversation about that here and there. But what's going to happen? And Jerome, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, hey, we're talking to these mid-size and small banks to make sure that they're on top of these potential losses from commercial real estate. He pretty much said the same thing that the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said, that there's going to be, this is the bad news that we got to think about. There's going to be bank failures. He said it. He said it out of his mouth. He said there's going to be some bank failures. But he did say that there's going to be bank failures, mid-size and small banks. Mid-size and small banks, there'll be some bank failures. And there'll be bank failures because of the commercial real estate. Some of these small banks, they wrote a whole bunch of They gave a whole bunch of loans for commercial real estate, and those loans, they're coming due. And also because of the bank term funding program as well, that's going to cause some bank failures. Be looking for that in the next 6 months. If you're a consumer, if you're a regular old average Joe like me, be looking for that in the news in the next 6 months, right? Just don't panic. We'll talk about that also a little bit later, right? What we can be doing right now. So I think it's significant that there'll be some bank failures, guys. And they are hearing, he already knows this. They've already been talking to these banks ahead of time, right? Saying, hey, where are you at? Right? The Fed, man, the Fed is really big. Okay. Most people don't realize the Fed is really big, right? Tens and tens of thousands of employees that work for the Fed in all different types of capacities, right? But the Fed is already predicting what they think will happen, and they're already 2 steps ahead. When the Fed reports something in the news, you're getting the news months after the Fed has already studied, restudied, researched, done all their conversations, talked, re-talked, met, re-met. They did all that. And then you get the news like it's breaking news or something's happening. But they already know what's going on with their member banks. Because when you go to any district, you go to the St. Louis district, you go to the Atlantic district. I don't know what they call them. They have different numbers. But you go to the New York district, the Kansas City district, whatever district, San Francisco, wherever they are. All the banks all the smaller banks that you and I go to every day are a part of that whatever larger Fed bank runs that district, right? And so that Fed that heads that district in Atlanta has talked to is in conversations, communications constantly with all the member banks that are under the Fed. Remember I said the Fed funds rate is banks exchanging money with each other overnight? There's a network of banks that are working when you're sleeping, borrowing money from each other, replenishing cash, whatever you call it, right? They're doing all this while we're sleeping, and all we see is the end result on the news the next day or 5 days later. But the Fed has already done all their research on all that, right? In terms of their policy and all this good stuff. So the Fed is already predicting and preparing for bank failures due to the commercial lending that's going to have a big issue, due to the ending of the bank term fund program. They're already doing all this behind closed doors, right? And it was a senator, I think, from Nevada is where I pulled it up from. Senator from Nevada who asked about the commercial real estate risk, right? Especially in the office, retail, and multifamily sectors of commercial real estate, right? And I think FED Chair Jerome Powell said, yeah, commercial real estate is seeing very few transactions right now. And he went into that a little bit. Obviously, people working from home, downtown office districts are, a lot of them are not all of them, but some of them are vacant, much more vacant than they were 3 or 4 years ago. So these banks that are heavy on commercial real estate are going to be taking a hit. They've already been identified, talked to, and are in conversation with the Fed, who's checking their books, right? There will be bank failures. Just understand that. The word he used was, we're going to make it manageable. That's the word he used, manageable. But of course he would use that word, right? Because if he said, oh, it's going to be crazy out there, right? Then all the banks would go crazy. There'll be a run on the bank tonight and right. So he has to be very, very careful with his words, obviously. So the Fed is telling us right there that banks are going to see some problems due to the commercial lending that's happening in the next year, right? So a couple of things that the Fed said that I thought was interesting you need to know as a consumer. They said the Fed Chair Jerome Powell said today that any digital version of the dollar is a long way off. And I know we talk about CBDCs, central bank digital currency sometimes on this channel, along with other channels. Other folks talk about it. But he made a point to say, because one of the senators, was it a senator or House person? One of the Congress folks asked him about it. And he said it's a long way off. And he assured the Congress that there's no way the Fed would be able to abide by a structure that would give central bank visibility into our individuals what we're doing with our money. I don't know how believable that is, right? And he went on to say that that's the system they use in China, but we're not going to be using it in America. So just something to think about. I want to put CBDCs on your radar. If you're looking for something to research and understand about money, try to understand the digital version of the dollar that is coming our way. It may be 2 years, 5 years, 15 years. I don't know. Could be 20 years, but it's coming. And a lot of people are, have a little bit of fear about that because if that happens, you can't put money under your mattress anymore, right? If that happens, the Federal Reserve is going to know everything about your money. Although Fed Chair Jerome Powell said that we won't have visibility into what individuals do with their money. Listen, they're already working on CBDCs. Okay. He can't tell you a whole bunch about it because, again, what he says sway markets, and it sways all different types of things, political action, all this kind of stuff, right? He made a point to kind of keep the politics separate from what they're doing with monetary policy, but he knows he can't say certain things. Just like I told you, just like he said, we have been in talks with with the mid-size and small banks regarding the commercial real estate fiasco that's going to take place. You best believe the Fed is already working on a digital version of the dollar, a CBD, a central bank digital currency. They're working on that. He's not going to come out and tell you all that because obviously he can't. And he said it's a long way off. I don't know what a long way is. 2 years, 20 years, right? Another thing that was mentioned, I'm just summarizing some of the things that we need to know about as consumers, is the fact that the financial markets, guys, the stock market, showed really little reaction to his comments today and yesterday, right? Not much. I think yesterday it closed a little bit ahead. I didn't check how it closed today, but the stock market is not reacting one way or the other, right? Not really reacting one way or the other, right? And then you had like John Kennedy used the F word and all the, he's cursing. Elizabeth Warren got a little bit feisty, right? But basically, the stock market didn't take a hit one way or the other. It didn't really react one way or the other, right? Because typically when the Fed goes before the House and the Senate, right, people aren't really focused too heavy on that. But I think we need to know what's going on and what's being talked about, what's being said. And that's why I want to bring this type of information to you guys in plain, regular folk language, right? Here's what all this means for us. Let me just kind of give you a brief on what it means for us, right? Do not change how you invest based on what the Fed says or doesn't say, right? I typically try to give us something to think about the second half of the video of the lives here, guys. What can we be doing? What can we be thinking about? You don't have to change how you invest based on what Powell says and what Powell doesn't say, or what economists say, right? All these talking heads and talking points, everyone has an opinion, okay? You need to program yourself. This is what you got to do when it comes to investing in the stock market, investing in index funds, ETFs, whatever. You need to program yourself to buy more when it goes down, or to dollar cost average. Buy the same amount no matter what's happening in the market. Two ways to look at it. Two simple ways to look at it. The market goes down, buy more, or just simply dollar cost average. That's it. And hold. This is my opinion, guys. I can't give you anything. I can't give you somebody else's opinion or somebody else's outlook. I'm giving you my opinion. Two things you got to do. You're holding regardless in terms of your investments. You're holding long-term. But you got to program yourself not to be taken up with all of the fear or all of the talking heads or all of what they say and don't say. I'm just giving you the information so you're aware. I'm not giving you the information to scare you or giving you the information to make you panic. I'm give you the information because I want you to have information. Okay? But you got to be programmed to not have the fear that other people may have. Dollar cost average means you just put the same amount of money in at the same regular interval, no matter what's going on in the market, whether it's up, whether it's down, whether it's stable, whether it's bull market, bear market, doesn't matter, guys. Same $200 every 2 weeks, same 15% of your check, same 10% of your check, right? Every single time, the whole time, without trying to jump in time. If you want to jump in time, cool. Just make sure when it's down, you load up, right? Right now, there's a 90% chance the stock market has already priced in a 90% chance that the Fed won't cut rates until about June. Well, actually, 90% chance they won't cut rates at their next meeting, which is just 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away. 90% chance that's built into the market. I think it's a little bit lower chance for their next one, but everybody is pretty much expecting that the Fed is probably going to start cutting rates in June. Cutting rates. And careful with rate cuts. Listen to me carefully, guys. Careful with rate cuts. So just to reiterate this, rate cuts, when the Fed wants to cut the Fed funds rate, that's usually a measure that's used to boost the economy. Okay? That's a measure that's used to get people to go out and spend. We want you to go out and spend money. We want you to go out. So they reduce the rates down to down and down and down to incentivize you to go out and spend. And remember earlier I said the Fed funds rate doesn't really only affects the short-term rates, but it has a trickle-down effect to mortgage rates, right? So 3 years ago, when the Fed funds rate was down around zero, mortgage rates were down around 3%, 2.5%, 3%. But as the Fed funds rate has been raised, it's indirectly affected mortgage rates, and mortgage rates has gone up as well. So when the Fed cuts those rates and starts lowering those rates later this year, it's going to have a trickle-down effect for mortgage rates because it's going to incentivize people to go out and buy and get a loan, etc. Right? That's kind of how the whole thing works, right? But be careful with rate cuts so that you understand that cutting of rates is usually something done to boost the economy. Me personally, let me give you my take on it. I don't think the Fed should cut rates too soon. I don't think they should be in a hurry to cut rates. That's my opinion. I think they should wait until June to cut rates. You got super low unemployment. I would share my GDP graph with you. GDP looks good, gross domestic, right? So the economy is growing. Maybe not growing as much as it was 6 months ago, right? A year ago, but it's growing. Economy is growing. Unemployment is low. Chill. That's my opinion. Don't start cutting rates too soon, because if you cut rates too soon, something crazy happens, right? Keeping in mind that there's a lot of things going on around the world out of the control of the right, that we don't know about, right? You got what's happening over near the Red Sea with the airstrikes. You got what's happening over in Gaza. You got what's or in Israel. You got what's happening over in Ukraine. You got a lot of kind of like. Then you got the elections, right? I don't know if you guys know, but this is the largest amount of elections worldwide in the history of the history that we know of. To this year, 2024, largest amount of elections, right? El Salvador, Brazil, whatever, America, right? Elections are, it's a very volatile year, right? And they may start cutting rates, but I don't think they should cut rates. They will cut rates, but I don't think they should cut rates just yet. My personal opinion, right? The whole point of cutting rates is typically to push spending to try to fix something that's broken or wrong. Right now, ain't a whole lot broke. And rate cuts are by nature inflationary. If you cut too much, it's a problem, right? because then spending picks back up. And what happens when spending picks back up? When spending picks back up, now everybody has the money to go buy my hat at $15. So what am I going to do as a business? Am I going to leave it at $10 when now everybody can go out and get my hat at $15 because the Fed has lowered the rates and everybody can go out and spend more? I'm going to increase the price of my hat to $15 because now everybody can buy it. So rate cuts end up being inflationary by default, right? So I wanted you guys to kind of think about the economy and what's happening. But your job is to stay steady, keep investing, don't panic. Guys, give me a thumbs up if you like this type of video where I'm kind of breaking this stuff down a little bit in plain language. Give me a thumbs up and let me know. Let me look at the chat real quick, guys. And I know we got people on different places. We got some folks on a Facebook group here. We got some folks in a lot of different places. Feel free to drop a comment, guys, or leave me a notion if you can, if I get cut off on one of these. If not, we're going to be here just for a little bit more. A few more minutes, guys. So let me just kind of run through here and look at what you guys are talking about in the chat. Make sure your bank is FDIC insured. Absolutely. Very important. Hope I'm not talking too loud. Let's see here. Somebody said I didn't buy a CD at a bank because it wasn't FDIC insured. Yeah, you want to be FDIC insured. Let's see here. We need housing change commercial into residential. Okay. I like that. I get that. Some housing is considered commercial, by the way. Over a certain amount of units, multifamily units are considered commercial. Let's say. Somebody said just like, okay, thanks. I appreciate that, Clint Perry. Somebody says CBDC, central bank digital currency, central bank digital dollar. Oh, digital dollar. What did I say? Okay, so see, trending for a certain FDIC is I don't know. They can control your spending. Absolutely, they control your spending. That's the whole point of it, right? Raise rates, lower rates, and it kind of controls what the masses does. Somebody checking in from Escanaba, Michigan. I hope I said that right. Let's see. Crypto is about to rise. Maybe Bitcoin. Somebody says Bitcoin. If you're a Bitcoin person, me personally, I'm not a Bitcoin person. But if you are, I'm not mad at you. I'm not going to downplay you or down talk you or beat you up for being a Bitcoin person, but you better be diversified. That's for sure. Don't have all your coins in one coin. That's a weird thing to say, but it's true. Start young is huge. Invest in precious metals. I'm not a precious metals guy either. It's juicy work. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. I appreciate you. Somebody said that is true. Build wealth when it's in the red. Absolutely. That's how you make money. Somebody the other day was asking me about buying real estate. Listen, of course, I got a bunch of videos on this channel, guys. You can check it out. I got 100 videos about real estate, buying real estate. I've owned real estate for 20 some odd years. Listen, when you start buying real estate, you're supposed to buy real estate at a discount if you're an investor. Don't buy real estate retail if you're an investor. Now, if you're not an investor, that's cool. You can buy your piece of real estate. But if you really want to make money, you make money when you purchase real estate. You make a lot of money when you purchase it if you purchase it at a discount. The house is $200,000 and that's the market value. I'm not trying to buy a house for $200,000 if I'm investing in a house. I'm trying to buy that $200,000 house for $75,000. I want a discount when I buy real estate. I want a discount when I buy stocks, right? I don't want to buy stock at the top, but if I do buy it at the top, I'm going to hold it for a long term because over the long term, I'm expecting it to go up. I'm an index fund and an ETF fund, guys. I'm not really an individual stock guy, although I have a few pieces of individual stock. Don't have many at all because 99% of everything I do is in index funds and ETFs, and I think that's a better place to start for a lot of folks. Let's see here. A lot of people are using credit cards now. Yeah, there's statistics that say, many studies say more people are using credit cards today than ever before. Right. And more people are carrying a higher balance on their credit cards than ever before right now. Just be careful about that, guys. Small rate cut in June, maybe. Yes, I think maybe 25 basis points in June is what the cut's going to be. That's 0.25% or a quarter of a percent. That's what I think it's going to be. It could be a half, 50 basis points. We'll see. Super low unemployment because of people having to work 3 jobs. That could be right. Uncle Thursday said, people working 3 jobs, everybody's got to get more income. Yeah. Perhaps somebody said the circle continues. Absolutely. Thanks for the thumbs up. I appreciate you guys for thinking that this is something that is going to be this valuable to help some folks understand. Because listen, a 3-minute segment on Bloomberg, a 3-minute segment on whatever show, whatever channel you watch. Sometimes that stuff is talked about. This stuff is talked about over our heads, to be honest with you. And I just like to break this thing down so it's not really over our head, but it's something that we can understand in plain language. And that sometimes scares us about these money issues, these economic issues. We think, oh, that's economics. It's like a foreign language. It's really very understandable, but you just got to break it down in a different language so that it's more understandable. Somebody said there's a lag effect, so they can't wait too long. Yes, John Joe is very important. Lag is important. So what lag is the policy that the Fed makes. It takes a while for that to trickle down into regular, average, everyday people like me and you. That's the lag effect, right? It's like the Fed can cut the rate in June. The Fed could cut the rate by 200 basis points in June down to 3.5%, 3.25%, 3.5%. We won't feel that until October, November. That's the lag effect that you hear sometimes, or what John Joe mentioned in the chat. That's the lag effect. It takes time for policies to really play themselves out and affect the average everyday person. Good point, John. Let's see here. Somebody said, hey, good to see you. Pretty soon something's going to break and they'll be forced to cut rates. Yes, that's the balancing act that they are actually in the middle of. It's challenging right now, right? Thank you very much for that thumbs up, Martin. I appreciate that. Bitcoin is volatile in nature, somebody said. If you have some skin in the game, you just have to be careful about knowing when to get out if you're in the Bitcoin stock or ETFs, I think they're talking about. True. Let's see. Does this bank info include credit unions? Good question. I'll have to study up on that. I think credit unions are at a risk as well, right? Because they do fund some of the things we're talking about. So keep that in mind. All right. Keep that in mind as well. Credit unions can be at risk as well. Okay. Let's see, inflation or layoffs. No matter what, it's hard to afford life. Yeah, it's hard to afford life. That's why, listen, what Melanie Rose just said there, inflation, layoffs, whatever it could be, it's hard to afford life. And she said, I still can only control what I do. And Melanie, this is the whole point of this whole channel. This whole YouTube channel is predicated on the fact that, yes, all of this is happening. The Fed, the rate cuts, interest rates, all these things are happening outside of us, right? The whole gist of this channel, is that right? Gist or gist? The whole gist of this channel, this YouTube channel, is that we got to do what we can control. We can only do what we have, what we can do. We can't really control everything else, right? But we can control getting a higher paying skill. So we don't make $20 an hour. We make $30 an hour or $100 an hour. We can control starting a side hustle so we can understand how to bring in more income. We can control how to increase our value to the marketplace, right? We can control controlling our expenses to an extent, right? We can control some of the things. And the things that we can control are the things that can make us, that can really help us build wealth. We don't need the Fed to help us build wealth. We don't need the president or Congress or city council members. We don't need them to build wealth, right? This is why you got to be willing, if you want to build some wealth, you got to be willing to make a shift in what you do, right? Because you can't just go along and do business like 1980, right? Work a job for 35, 40 years, have a pension. You can't do that anymore. So everything around you has changed. Now it's time for you to change, right? What are you doing different that's going to get you to another level? Somebody in the chat said life is hard. Yeah, life is very, very hard. Affording things are very, very hard. What are you doing to make it easier? Because the Fed ain't knocking on your door trying to figure out, how are things going for you? Can we make the life a little better for you? No, they're not doing that for you. So you have to actually do something different. to get something different, right? And that's what this channel is all about, empowering regular people to be better with their money, to have more money, to earn and make more money, to save and invest more money, right? That's the kicker. Increase assets, lower expenses, build your, what do you call it? Your net worth, right? So that's a good point, Melanie. Thanks for throwing that in there. That sent me off on a tangent. But anyway, somebody said buy U.S. oil when it's down, right? Everybody uses it. Not bad, P.S. Let's see here. The rule of 72. Yep, double your money. Let's see here. Somebody said the velocity banking system is in tandem with your credit card, can be a great way to reduce debt. Yeah, maybe. I'm not a velocity banking person, but that's okay. Good point. In this chat, you can mention anything you want to mention. That's fine. It's open. Let's see. Open to Fidelity brokerage account, mutual and ETFs. Will eventually add REITs. When I pay down one of my debts, half of that payment will go in my next debt. The other half REITs to my own portfolio. Good plan, Magris. Let's see here. Let's see. Martin said, control the controllables. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I appreciate it. Yeah, guys, if you check the chat, if you check the description box here on YouTube, I got free stuff down there. Free ebook that's down there. That's 24 laws of money. Check that out. And feel free to drop a comment. Make sure you hit the like button, the thumbs up button for me, guys. And I got a bunch of other stuff down there. Other videos where I go into more detail about the Fed. That's down there as well. Share this video, share the link to the video. That really helps the channel out, helps the channel grow. Let's see here. Somebody said, I've listened to your YouTube channel for years. The only debt I have is my mortgage, 70K, no credit card, no loans, etc. Yin, appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you for being an avid listener and supporter of the channel. I appreciate you. I'm so happy to hear that you've gotten something out of this channel, right? This information. This is free game for anybody. Use it, put it in your arsenal, and I appreciate that comment. Thank you so much, Ian. Somebody said Bitcoin. Somebody says, I got a federal job. Thank God. Pension and TSP, smartest move ever. John Joe, when did you get your federal job? Let me know. Because I can give you a whole bunch of information about working for the federal government. Let's see. Vanessa said, of course. You're welcome, Vanessa. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Somebody said, speaking truth. So that's what I like to do, guys. If you're new to this channel, haven't been here before, on Thursday afternoons, I come on here and I have this conversation, sometimes about a personal financial situation. Sometimes I'm answering a question that was left in the chat. Sometimes I'm just breaking down some important information that we need to know. Sometimes I'm just motivating, inspiring you to get better with your money. Sometimes I'm giving you real solid, strong information, like when we talked about high yield savings accounts. We did a live about that a couple of weeks ago. What are they? How to choose one, etc. Right? Sometimes I'm just giving you information about the federal government, what's happening in terms of our money and the federal government, right? But the whole time, the whole purpose is to empower you with your personal finances, empower you with your money, right? I know it's been kind of a long live, guys, so I'm not going to hold you up here. I just want to have this conversation that, hey, it's official. The Fed is not ready. What are they not ready to do? They're not ready to cut rates. Not yet. The Fed is not ready to cut rates. That could be bad news for some people because it means that if you're looking to buy a house in the next 4, 5, 6 months, it means that your mortgage rate won't go down. If you're looking to buy a car and finance a car, which I totally am 100% against financing something going down in value, but if that's you, you're not going to find your rate going down for financing a car anytime soon. If you're using a credit card, you're not going to find your short-term rates going down in your credit. And credit cards are loans. So you understand, they are affected by the Fed funds rate. You're not going to find that rate going down anytime soon. Money's going to still be fairly expensive. And I say fairly expensive because a Fed funds rate between 5.25% and 5.5%, historically, that ain't super duper high. It can go much higher. Just ask the folks that were around in the 80s, right? but it's high compared to where rates have been in the last 10, 15 years. But guess what? Those rates ain't coming down no time soon. So that's bad news for some people, that the Fed is not ready to lower their rates. It's official. Jerome Powell, over the last couple of days, his testimony, his semi-annual, twice-a-year testimony in front of the Senate and the House should have gave you all the proof you need to know that the Fed is not going to cut rates on March 19th, March 20th, in a few weeks. They just ain't doing it, right? So I just want to be honest with you and tell you what I think and what I feel. And in my opinion, I don't think the Fed should cut rates. Not just yet. Not just yet. So, hey, guys, I appreciate, somebody says, won't cutting rates increase inflation? Yeah, Zach. Rewind this about 10, 15 minutes. That's what I said. You're right, Zach. You're absolutely 100% right. Cutting rates tries to boost the economy. And when you try to boost the economy, that means people go out and spend money. And when people go out and spend money, that's an inflationary tool if you're not careful, right? John Joe. Let's see. IT, good. Boom. Levin, good for you. Good for you, John Joe. I like it. I like it. John Joe, we can swap some stories, John Joe. I've worked for the federal government for quite a while. Let's see. Good for you, John Joe. Congratulations on that. All right, so I'm out of here, guys. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you stepping in here. I appreciate your support. Thank you so, so much for joining me on this talk about the Fed and what's happening. And don't forget to smash the like button. Don't forget to drop a comment. When I do these lives, I typically go in there and I answer questions, right? And don't forget to join me Saturday, 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time. And hey, I don't mention it as much, but I do one-on-ones, guys. I work with people personally on their personal financial situation one-on-one. We share screens. We spend 90 minutes having a conversation about their own personal information, because personal finance is personal. This cookie cutter stuff that every situation matches every person, that's not really right. Right? There's a lot of things that are standard things, right? But there's a lot of things that depends on a lot of situations, right? How long you been on that job? How do you like that job? What city are you located? I can go on and on. Everybody's situation is slightly different, and I like to recognize that. So I do one-on-ones with folks. That information is in the description box below on YouTube as well. But I do it just to help folks, right? Appreciate you, JT Coin Ring. Shout out to you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a long-time supporter. Supporter. Merch is coming. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here. As I always say, the best person who's going to take care of the old you is the young you. Guys, take good care of yourself and take care of other people. Until the next video, peace.